Lon, welcome to the Tales of Leadership Round 2. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing great, man. How are you doing?
I like we were talking about before. There's nothing that I would rather do than to discuss what I'm passionate about, which is leadership. And even though that I have the day off, right? Like it's Martin Luther King Jr. 4-day weekend for the military, this is something I'm deeply passionate about. And again, I'm humbled to just have the opportunity and the space to discuss it with you.
Oh man, likewise. You said this is 2.0, and what people probably don't realize is that we tried this 18 months ago, and we got done, and the audio was somehow had a bug in it, and we weren't able to do it. And if we can recreate that, even though neither one of us can probably remember what we really rambled about, if we can recreate that, this is going to be absolutely a treat.
And I think that's a testament too of just being persistent and consistent and being okay with being imperfect. Like I've been now, podcasting. And I know you've been podcasting for a while. And when I first started off, like those first 3 or 4 episodes were really rough. Me just figuring out like what kind of battle rhythm and the systems that I needed. So thank you for the grace and believing in me enough to do a round 2.
Oh man, of course. It just comes with the territory. When you're pushing the boundaries, you're gonna have glitches along the way. That's just how it goes. And it's happened to me many times, more than I care to really talk about. But that's just how it goes. And that's what happens when you kind of push the boundaries a little bit. So here we go.
So let's start off with you just taking the time to provide an overview to the listeners of who you are.
Yeah. So first and foremost, I always introduce myself as a South Dakota farm kid.
Hmm.
And that's 100% the truth. I was born and raised on our family farm. I was the fourth generation. And I expected that after I graduated from college, I would go home and take over the family farm. Well, it got to be January before my graduation in May of college, and my phone rang, and it was a United States Senator's office. And he asked me if I would be interested in going to work for him to help in the state, but to help create the next farm bill, but to also be his eyes and ears while he was in Washington, D.C. And I just didn't think that call was going to happen again. And I knew that the farm would be there. So I said, you know what? I'm going to take that job. I knew I would regret it if I said no. So I took that job, and I did that for about 5 years. And in the process, I met an individual who had a very substantial family owned bank in my home state of South Dakota. And this individual asked me if I would come to work for his bank, and he gave me a job that was usually saved for somebody who's got 8 or 10 years of experience. And he offered me a position, and I took it because I figured if I didn't take it, I might regret it if I didn't. My wife and I were just starting a family. The political realm back then wasn't nearly what it is now. I was really proud to say I worked for a United States Senator back in the day, and I'm still proud to say I did. But it wasn't the atmosphere we have now, and we don't need to get into that. But I feel like it's important. I was really proud of the work I was able to do there. Going to work for a bank, I got to learn about profit and loss from other
Yeah.
people and good business and bad business, and it taught me a whole bunch about who really had money and who didn't, who looked like they had money but didn't, who looked like they didn't have money but did. So all these things, and it showed you, look, you've got to ask some questions before you go ahead and make a judgment on whether somebody is creditworthy. Well, that translates into everything. And so I really took that with me into my next role, which when I was in banking, I had a private client group, and one of my private client members worked at a public company. He recruited me into a public company called Raven, and I spent 15 years there doing 3 different jobs. But I ended there after 6 years in charge of mergers and acquisitions for our company. And we transacted at the very end of 2021. And I separated from the company then in February of 2022, and I launched Normal 40.
Dude, that's amazing. And you said a couple of things in there that I'm really curious of how you developed that mindset about making decisions that you, in the future that you knew that you potentially would regret, and that you just decided to jump right in. One of the words that you always use and I love is on mission, because we use that I think within the military as well. So here you are. I don't know how old you were. We'll just say 18, 19-year-old kid growing up on the farm in the Midwest, and the U.S. Senator calls you to help chase significance, not success, and putting you in that mindset. What helped drive you in making that decision to, hey, let's go chase this hard thing?
Yeah, great question. I wish I could look back and say that I was wise enough at,
Mm,
just as a fresh college graduate to say, boy, this would be significant. No, man, it was cool. It was going to work for a senator, and it was what I should do next. But your question is this: how did I weigh that? And I'll tell you, one of the hardest things that I've done in my life to this point, Joshua, is to go home and tell my dad, after it had been understood from my siblings generationally, the family business, the farm that was bought and lost in the 30s and bought back, I was going to take it over. That was the
mm,
expectation. So it was a hard decision for me to say, am I going to go home and am I going to take over the family farm? Or am I going to answer this call? And I looked at it and I wrestled with this a long time. But the very central question that I came back to again and again and again at three different points in my life was this: if I get 1, 2, 3, or 4 years older than this or past this moment and I don't do it, if I pass up this opportunity to go work for a US Senator, will I regret it? And
yeah.
my answer was yes. I couldn't imagine sitting in a tractor cab for 10 hours a day, wondering what would have happened if I'd have just said yes. It would have gnawed at me and eaten at me my entire life. So I had to say yes. I had to go figure it out if I was capable of doing it. So it was the central question that I used every time I've made a major life decision. Will I regret it if I don't?
Mm. I love that, man. It's just a framework I think revolves around the core values of who you are, right? And I think one of the most essential things within life now, especially when we go chase hard things, is being able to embrace that level of risk. There's always a trade-off, and spoiler alert, it's one of your books that we're going to get into. But I love how that beautifully transitions because now I can see that thread that's connected you through your entire life that now have inspired you to where you are right now of writing a book and being a successful entrepreneur. But you have such a unique perspective, I think, on leadership of being in a very successful business, Raven Industries, and then transitioning at the height of your career when everyone else looking outside in would like, hey, this dude's highly successful. He has everything. He has the car, he has the money, he has the house, he has all of those things. But you internally, were not happy. And you said it so nonchalantly, but you were in three jobs in Raven Industries. So international sales, vice president of business development, and the CEO of the senior director of corporate development within there. So you continue to climb that ladder. What I would love to know, in the 12 years that you worked in Raven Industry, what allowed you to continue to climb and gain more influence and authority?
A couple of things. One, I had a boss who believed in me.
Mm,
Two, I always, I never, ever allowed myself to leave to interpretation or to question my integrity and
mm,
and the ability of anybody in that company to trust me. And so when you work through a company and you just work hard, you're going to go a long ways. When you work hard and you have an advocate, somebody who is on your team, on your side, willing to help you, which I had, that is super helpful. When you do work that is surprisingly different, not
yeah.
even better, when you just approach something that's been done the same way differently, you put your own flair on it. Now, this isn't to say you make this huge leap and you do something that's going to get you in trouble because it's too big. No, just within what you can control, wherever you are, whether you're an entry level position or you're the executive in charge of mergers and acquisitions, which runs the span of my 15 years there. When you were just figuring out how you could approach a problem differently and provide a perspective that was different, all of a sudden it establishes you as somebody who's willing to do things that are approached from the standpoint of curiosity rather
Mm,
than conviction. And look, we can parse that apart if you want, because that's that's a big mind shift.
Yeah.
But when you approach what you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, and this is true in business, it's true in your home, it's true in your politics, it's true in your religion, it's true in your relationship with your neighbor, it's true in all aspects. When you approach that situation with your curiosity rather than your conviction of what you
Mm,
assume they are going through, what you assume they are doing, and what you assume is right and wrong in this black and white, it opens up this entire new aperture. So now back to your question. How did you have success? I had an advocate that would take a bet on me. I did things my own way that was always in alignment with where the company was going. And I worked as hard or harder than anyone else around me. And those three ingredients were enough to keep propelling me through the company.
I love that. It's so simple from a standpoint. Do the work. Do the work. You're going to have the integrity or the character build up to where people are going to believe in you. That you're going to have advocates on your team, and then always be in alignment. Never have anyone question your integrity. It's simple, and I absolutely love it, brother.
You're going to love this too, man. So I didn't serve. So first of all, let me say to you, thank you for your service. And I mean that.
Yeah.
But on my when I was both the president of a aerospace and defense contracting division in our company, which I did for 6 years, and when I was running mergers and acquisitions, on the top of my whiteboard, I had the definition of a campaign. And the
Mm,
definition of a campaign is different things for different people. If you're a politician, it means one thing. But if you are a member of the United States Army, it means something different. My definition read this: a connected series of operations designed to yield a particular result. Just think about that. Break that down for where you're at. I knew what our campaign was. I knew that sometimes I had to write it. I
yeah.
knew sometimes I had to inspire people to it. And I knew that it had to fit within the mission of the company. A connected series of operations. Well, no matter where you're at in your company, no matter where you're at in whatever you do through the course of your day, a connected series of operations. They're operations, they're things that have to be done, and they have to connect. And why? Because they are designed. Design means that's with intent. There's a strategy, there's a plan to yield a particular result. Everything, every word in that definition has a meaning, and it's powerful. So the campaign, and I would read that every morning when I came in. What are my connected series of operations, and what is the particular result I need to design them towards? And it really, those things really just provided this clarity every single day that I would come in and execute towards. And it was super helpful to me. And I hope that somebody's jotting this down who's listening, because man, it really does help narrow your focus on what's the most important thing I need to accomplish today.
So you talk about jotting down notes. I already have 2 pages of notes. I'm trying to feverishly keep up with you, and I love that. So my wife always gets mad because it's just like, you say I love that way too much on your podcast, but that's who I am. So I'm not going to change it.
Dude, you do
But
you. I love it too, man.
what you talk about there is exactly what we do within the military space, but it's depending on the level of authority or the hierarchy of the organization. We all have a mission. We all have a vision that we're trying to achieve, which is that mission of the how. And then we have the key tasks that are associated with that, like the threads along the way with a desired end state. And that's how we essentially boil down going into a campaign of how you talked about each individual organization all the way down to the platoon level should essentially have key tasks that feed into that mission. And when you can do that and you can create that synergy, you're all working towards the same desired end state and vision. That's powerful. And I love how you made that connection to a campaign equals clarity. And I think that's the end state, is we're trying to create clarity, not only in like a business, but I think that leadership is holistic. You can't lead other people unless you lead yourself and you fill your own cup up. So that's a beautiful point, man. The next point that I would love to try to get to is walking through still your leadership journey working in Raven Industries. What was some of the most challenging aspects in terms of leadership that you ran across?
In terms of just things that I would wrestle with. myself.
Yeah, that you would internally wrestle with it maybe brought you additional like fear and anxiety.
Yeah. When I came into Raven, um, I didn't have a lot of experience leading teams yet.
Mm,
I'd led a couple different times. I led a small team in the bank, a handful, 5 or 6 people, and I led a small team in as a member of the United States Senate and a Senate staff, just to be clear. And so when I came into Raven, I immediately on day one had still a small team, but a bigger team than what I was used to. It was probably 15 people.
yeah.
And I remember from that point on, I thought that kind of my job was, as I was working to establish myself, I felt like my job was probably to show how smart I was and
Mm,
how I understood the mission and how I had control over all of the things that I should have control over. And I had my first job in Raven only 2 years. I was international sales director and I would travel the world setting up distribution around the world. And it was fantastic. I was gone a lot. And the CEO then moved me to be president of one of our operating divisions, an aerospace and defense contracting division. And now I went overnight from a team of about 15 to 20 to a team of about 350.
wow.
And looking back, it's one of these things. I always said yes, and then I knew I would figure it out. When the
Yeah.
CEO said, "I would like you to do this," the answer was immediately, "Yeah, I got this. Give me the ball.
Mm,
I can't wait. I got it." And I'd had a fair number of successes through my career at that point, and so the answer, of course, was yes. And I was thrust into this position where I had hundreds of people reporting to me from all over the world. And I came out of a industry I knew, which was technology in agriculture, to aerospace and defense. I didn't speak military jargon. I didn't understand the stars and stripes on uniforms. I didn't. I was a South Dakota
yeah.
farm kid. And now here I am. I'm leading people who came from uniform, and I had all of this to learn. But here was my problem. I still told myself I had to be the guy who had the answers. I had to be
Mm,
the one who knew how to cast a vision and be convicted, lead with conviction over what was right. I loved working for people who had conviction. I wanted to be a leader who had conviction because conviction is powerful. Conviction
yeah.
inspires people to follow. But if you operate only from a place of conviction, now this is the second time I'm going to say this on this podcast already. If you operate from a place of conviction purely and you don't allow in curiosity, if you
Mm,
don't learn how to lead with your ears as much as your mouth, you set yourself up for some very, very dangerous outcomes. And I walked headlong into one that came up and smacked me right in the face because I was more interested in leaning into my conviction than I was into leading into my curiosity and allowing myself even to rethink decisions I had made once. Because conviction would say, "No, you made this decision, move forward." Curiosity would have said, "Well, you made that decision, but it's not working.
yeah.
Maybe we should tweak it." And it wasn't until I literally stepped on a rake and I got smashed in the face that I realized that, okay, wait a minute. Conviction only gets you so far. Then it gets you in trouble. And so that's where I realized there's a pivot here in how I'm going to choose to lead. And I made that tough transition, but it came after I had what I deemed to be a fairly public failure that I
Yeah.
had to endure emotionally and personally and all the things that spiritually, all the things. So that I would say without question was my hardest lesson learned.
I think that's one of the hard. First of all, that's crazy. Going from leading 15 people to over 300, and I put myself in that shoe because I've led organizations close to 300 people, and I've led organizations to 40, and that time has been 6 to 8 years. So I had time to mature, and also to get mentorship from people at that next level up. Always get that next level up, and I still didn't feel that I was 100% ready when I was finally put into those roles. So I could only imagine someone that leads a team of 15, highly competent, then jumping in a seat leading over 300 people, because I know that that mindset shift that you're talking about, and I call that really mission command. It's the ability to learn how to delegate down to lower levels and allowing people to really lean into their strengths and letting them run with it. Like how you talked about, get the football and go with it. And I had a boss tell me one time, Colonel Landers, we were getting ready to do a live fire exercise. And he talked about, Josh, you need to operate with mission command so much that you delegate to the point that you physically feel uncomfortable. And when you delegate to that point of where you physically feel uncomfortable, you know that you're doing it right. And that is a tough mindset shift to do. And especially how quick you did it. So that's awesome. And I think failing is not a bad thing.
It certainly shaped me. But I tell you what, that is superb advice. I mean, one of the hardest things you'll have to learn to do in your leadership journey is to learn how to delegate.
Yeah.
And to do it in the mind shift. I don't know how much you want to talk about this, but here's the thing I learned about delegation. And your advice is sound. I hope everybody wrote that down. It needs to be awkwardly uncomfortable to delegate. You need to do it to a place where it's awkwardly uncomfortable. And the people who I admired most in business, as the longer I was there, were the people who were wildly successful through delegation. I used to be inspired and impressed by the people who just got shit done and they could just power through and look, the more you give me, the more I'll do. And yeah, that is impressive. That's an impressive workhorse.
Yeah.
But I became over time more impressed by the people who are really effectively delegating to this awkward extent, not throwing work over the transom and saying, I get this done, but delegating, supporting, mentoring, grooming, holding awkwardly accountable, back to that word, to this place where when they got it wrong, he told them or she told them. And then over time, what they were doing is they were making leaders. And it started these little pods of great delegators in our company of thousands. There were just a few places that were spinning out these great leaders. And so when the company needed somebody, they went to these little pods. And so eventually you wanted to be on that person's team because they were creating leaders. Now they're holding you accountable. There were some awkward conversations. There was some long nights because you didn't do it right the first time, but you were prepared when you got tapped. And I learned how to do that over time. But it came through the ability to learn how to delegate. And it's not natural. You're not born with it. No. You got to learn how to delegate.
Two things right there that I love, and we can go wherever we want because everything you talk is fire, and I love it. So delegation allows one exponential growth because now you're working together as a team. So where one could do something, there's always a capacity. Like, Lon, if I give you a task and I keep giving you more stuff, at a certain point, you're going to hit your limit where your cup is going to overflow. And then we talk about rubber and glass balls. Rubber balls can bounce and it's okay because we can pick them back up. But when a glass ball breaks, it's shattered. And the amount of work to get that back to a functioning state is almost impossible. But when we learn to delegate, then we can give, I call them rocks. We can give those rocks to everyone on our team so those rubber balls never drop. And then it's just like a beautiful orchestra of where you can continue to grow and can continue to grow. And there's really no limits associated to it. And another point that I just realized when you said it, the second benefit is creating leaders. And it's a pipeline, 100%. If it's a pipeline, if done well, of where your organization not only is delegating and growing, but you're also creating the leaders for tomorrow that is going to allow for that sustained growth to continue. Boom. You just blew my mind.
And you see it. If you go back, if the people listening, just go back to any business, any place you've ever worked, and you'll identify the people. They're probably the people who annoy you at first. It's like, this person doesn't do anything. They delegate everything. And now there's two types of delegators. There's the ones who just give work away and they don't follow up until it's due. And then they get pissed off when it's not right. And nobody likes that person. And then there's the coach delegator, the one who doesn't say, hey, hit a home run and I'll see you at home plate. The one who says, no, you're holding the bat wrong. No, you don't swing at that pitch. No, when you're down in the count, the one who coaches you through it and holds you accountable to it is the one who delegates best so that they're building trust in what they can give you. And we can all look back and identify, well, yeah, the success I had, the boss I actually loved most certainly wasn't the one who let me get off easy. And it certainly wasn't the one who just gave me work and then when it wasn't right, let me hang out to dry. It was the one who challenged me, coached
Yeah.
me, mentored me, and showed me that I was capable of being better than I thought.
Yeah.
Those are incredible mentors, and it's done through delegation.
That's where I always love when I fall within organizations. I kind of call it stretching me, pushing me outside of my comfort zone. Like for right now, I work in acquisitions within Special Operations Command, and I have so much authority and responsibility. It's incredible. It really, really, really is. But if I were in any other organization, I would not have that same level of just autonomy. And it's really beautiful to have that because then now I have so much to do, but I need to rely on my team. Because if I don't rely on my team, then there's no way possible that I'm going to get it done. And another thing that I learned, I think, about delegation is there's certain tasks as the leader, we'll say CEO, that or a chief operation officer that you cannot delegate because it's so uniquely yours. So you have to also be careful, I think, within delegation, delegating the tasks that should be and could be completed by someone else, but understanding that there's certain things that you just cannot delegate because they're so unique to your responsibilities and your duty.
Yeah. Here's the analogy I used when I was mentoring young, hopefully future executives.
Yeah.
I said, imagine yourself as a musician. But different than that, imagine yourself as an orchestra conductor. Now, an orchestra conductor can go to the back and he or she can play the drums. She can come up and play the violin. She can go over and play the oboe. She can go over and grab a trombone or a tuba. She can play the clarinet. She can play the French horn. She can play whatever she wants to play, but not nearly as good as the person who's sitting first, second, or third chair.
Yeah.
Her job is to make sure she is putting the right people in first, second, and third chair to play their piece of the music beautifully so that everything comes together. Your job as a conductor, bring everyone together. Bring them in and take them out as they're supposed to go. But so you've got to have an understanding of what every instrument in your purview does, where they come, where they go, where they get louder, where they get softer, where they're out front, where they're in back. And then it's your job to stand up front and help them all find unity. And that requires accountability. It requires one-on-ones off to the side when the whole orchestra isn't there. It requires all of the things you need. But that is kind of the job of the leader at the time, at any given point in the process.
Yeah, that's spot on. Is that you cannot just delegate and not follow up. You have to trust, but to verify. And I've learned that process the hard way several times. Is that when you do delegate, you have to be able to stay in tune with that individual, and that's the cost of leadership. Leadership's not easy because it's a people-driven business. Leadership is a people-driven topic, and if you're not close to the people, then I personally think that you'll fail at leadership because people are absolutely essential. And I love how you talk about that orchestra. I always go back to Symphony of Destruction by Megadeth. It's just like that. In the military, we always have these different weapons, and there's a desired end state that we want to have on that objective. And you have to figure out, all right, what type of munition or what type of armament do we need to overlay to get those desired end states? But it's the same as true with like people. You're just delegating kind of the point of effects that you want on the target. And if you can change your mindset and think about people in that way, then that's when we allow for exponential growth. And when were you in your company working with the PIJA system? Because I want to bring this story up too.
All right. So it was 2009, the very end of 2009. We were a little small, nondescript, lighter than air company in the Midwest, and I understand who I'm talking to. So forgive me if I get some of this wrong.
Yeah.
But there was certainly in theater, this was the height of roadside bomb attacks throughout Afghanistan and Iraq. And there was nothing really that could be done about it short of flying helicopters 24/7 over the roadways. Well, that's just
Yep.
not feasible. And so there was this huge need, and there was this compelling there was a compelling needs request that was issued by the Office of the Secretary of Defense, and our company stood up and said, "We'll try it." And we provided a solution that was fantastic. In what normally would have taken 10 years to develop, for us to do it in about 6 months or
Wow.
less was fantastic. Now, when you do that, it's going to have some problems,
Yeah.
but it's also going to do its mission. And its connected series of operations was to save lives. And so we did the best to field those. And I took over that division about 3 months after we got that first contract. We delivered one unit to the Office of the Secretary of Defense at the time when I came in and took over as president of that division. And I led it until the first of 2016, the end of 2015.
So we use that almost every single day when we were in Afghanistan. I remember the first time that I pulled into RC South. I say pull in when I flew in on a CH-47, and I was looking around. It's like almost like Mars, right? Like everything's like this weird red clay, weird mountains everywhere. Just a different world if you've never been there. If you ever go to El Paso, Texas, it looks a lot like that.
Yep.
But when I saw these balloons like floating through, I thought that I was on an alien planet because I had no idea what they were. But then I grew to love them because so basically what it is, it's a tethered blimp with about a $10 million, very sophisticated camera inside that, if I remember right, could allow you to zoom up to was it 5 kilometers? Somewhere in there with good clarity. We would use it for counter IED deterrent all the time, and with great effects. We would use it for our actual maneuver operations because we could then overlay those. So we would have different cops or compounds, and we could overlay those PGIS cameras to where we didn't really necessarily have any dead space outside of like our organic UAV platforms that we had. I loved it. Then there's a crazy story I told you I was going to share. So evergreen chopper, which essentially is just a civilian bird that would come in and out of cops, was coming in. The balloon was fully up, I think whatever altitude that could be. The propellers from the evergreen chopper come in, cut the cord, and this PGIS camera goes floating off with the whole balloon. It ends up going like, I think almost like 50, 60 miles. And our mission was, hey, go retrieve that thing. So we basically shot down one of your balloons because we didn't want the camera to fall within the hands. But that was the craziest mission I think I've ever been on. Of like, hey, go shoot down a balloon. Okay, sold. I'll go do that.
So here's what's funny. I remember that.
Oh, really?
I was on the calls. So because we were our team was on daily calls, same time, same day, with people who are in theater. And I remember when that happened, and somebody I didn't realize it was a civilian helicopter. I thought it was a military one. Doesn't matter. The result was the same. Away
Yeah.
it went. And
Yeah.
and you guys had to scramble to go get it. But that's exactly right. I mean, the payloads on there, I have no idea if they're still classified, but at the time were highly classified as to what was on there for all the obvious reasons. And so to make sure that we the United States government retrieved it was super important. And because the payloads on there, yes, there was EOIR vision, but there was more than that was on there. And it was really important that we get that back and that it not fall in the wrong hands. But that was just a day in the life for you guys back then.
Yeah, it was like we would do two to three missions a day, but I really mean that. That system was integral in the success of everyday missions that we had, because it also saved us the ability to, so we didn't have to go out and do a counter or a presence patrol to keep a lock open. We could just scan that with a preset screening criteria of making sure that a lock was open or a passage, which was awesome. Yeah, so thank you, and I wanted to make sure we brought that up because I genuinely appreciate that. So kind
Oh,
of
man.
walking back into, your leadership journey, you make it to the height of your career. and then you decide, hey, this isn't for me. Walk me through how you made that decision.
I was 46 at the time, maybe 45. And but in my mid 40s, I was leading mergers and acquisitions for the same company. I'd moved on from leading this aerospace and defense contracting division that you and I were just talking about, and I
Yeah.
was now a corporate executive leading mergers and acquisitions. And I was I was I had achieved more than I ever thought I would achieve, Josh. I had just done really well. And I'm not saying that to toot my horn. I'm just saying it just kind of happened. And I would come into my office and I never came in and I was never unhappy.
Mm,
I didn't have this place where I was fed up or tired of a situation. I was never trying to escape something, but I would come into my office and I would leave my nice house and I would drive my nice car into my nice office and I'd sit down at my nice desk on the executive level and I would open up my computer and I would feel this thing in my gut and I would think to myself, well, is this it? I'm 45. If I'm going to work for the next 10 or 15 or 20 years, is this it? Is this what I have to give to the world? And
mm,
then I would slam my computer shut and I'd get frustrated with myself and be like, well, if this is it, shouldn't I just be happy, damn it? Shouldn't I just
yeah.
give thanks for the fact that I've got my health, I've got a great family, I have the nice house, the nice car, the nice office, blah, blah, blah. And shouldn't I just be happy? And then I'd guilt myself into saying, suck it up and go back to work. And I would. And about 90 days later, guess what? Same thing. And so there was something burbling in me. And I wasn't trying to escape something. I wasn't trying to quit, but something was trying to wake me up.
Mm,
And some right before COVID, I decided that one of the things I need to do is I need to figure myself out. I need to figure out what's going on. And so I decided that I was going to go get my executive coaching certification. And
mm.
so in March of 2020, like
Wow.
literally weeks before COVID, I
Wow.
went I went to Sarasota, Florida, and I spent 10 days in Sarasota, Florida with a small group of people, and I got certified as an executive coach. And I came back and I thought, well, I'm going to use this inside of my company to to continue to groom and build and grow the next generation of leaderships inside of my company, the next
Yeah.
generation of leaders inside of my company. And then at the same time, I reached out to some bank presidents because I came from that world, and I said, hey, if you've got some high achievers, let me just meet with them and I'll for free, and I'll just be their executive coach just because I enjoy it. Well, then COVID hit, and I realized that, hey, look, I really enjoy this. I'm really, and I'm pretty good at it. I'm good at
Yeah.
mentoring people. And so all of this was swirling around. I didn't ever expect it to be part of my real big future. I just knew I wanted to continue to do it inside of my company. Well, then fast forward into middle of 2021, and Raven, my company, instead of being the guy in charge of mergers and acquisitions coming in, I became one of the team members who are in charge of mergers and acquisitions going out. We
Mm,
were being acquired by CNHI, which ultimately happened. And so when that transaction happened, and just before it, I was busy. I didn't have time to think about what's next. But as it looked imminent, and we were months out from closing, I didn't expect that I was going to have the option to say. Usually, the sell side M&A guy, we're gone. The acquiring company kicks us out because they've got people like us on their team already. They don't need more of us, so we get let go, and that's what I was expecting to happen.
mm,
But Case was great. They were fantastic. They offered me a job. They asked me to stay. They gave me a 3-year sign-on. If I stayed on for 3 years, it's a big
yeah.
bonus. And so they made my decision harder, but I ultimately decided it's my time to go. And Josh, I used the exact same criteria we talked about earlier. I
Yeah.
thought I can stay with this company and I can do the things they're asking me to do, and I think I'd be good at it. But if I don't do that, if I don't go see what it is I should do next, if I don't separate from this and really get serious about who I'm here to be next, I might never do it. And instead of starting when I'm 46, maybe I won't start until I'm 56. And I just decided that I wasn't going to tolerate that. I made the hard decision of leaving. And I can tell you the whole story of how that came about if you care to know it. But at the end of the day, I decided that it was time to bet on me. I would regret it if I didn't do it then. And I separated and I didn't know what I was going to start. I didn't know what business was going to be. I didn't know if anybody would show up.
Mm.
And fast forward 2 years, it hasn't even been 2 years since I've left, but it's coming up on it. By the time you put this out, it'll be my 2-year anniversary. And I just couldn't be happier with the decision I made.
That's amazing, brother. Every time that I hear someone who does a major change in their life like that, it brings me a little bit of anxiety, to be honest with you, because I've been in the military since 2008. At this point, I have been institutionalized. You can use another word if you want for that, but that's inspiring that you take a bet on yourself. And I always said this in the military, and I genuinely mean it. The day that I show up to work and what I do is no longer fun is the day that I will get out of the military, because at least from my standpoint, military leaders have to have that emotional intrinsic motivation. And you had that same type, I think, of spark within your own personal life, is like, hey, is there more to life? Am I called to do something greater than what I'm doing right now? Am I happy, and am I actually improving the organization? And I'm sure you were, but you weren't happy. And then you were able to identify that and then go take a bet on yourself, which is, I honestly, look, hearing your story, I think COVID was probably a blessing, where I know it wasn't a blessing to the world, but for you, it gave you the space and the time probably to think. And then that chain of events of where your company was getting acquired, it almost just sounds like, it was meant to be. Like, you were supposed to break away, and then you start this thing called Normal 40. That what was the spark behind that?
Here's the spark. The day I left, it was February 1st was my last day at Raven. And so I woke up the next morning, first time in my life, since I was, probably the first time since I lived at the farm, I didn't have W-2 income. Well, I guess I didn't. My whole point is, it's the first time in my
Yeah.
professional life where I didn't have a W-2 income. And I woke up and I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about that, because I didn't have a plan. And I woke up that morning early, like I usually did. And I opened my eyes and I realized, you know what? My bed is soft. My wife is still here. The carpet was soft. The bathroom was warm. My running shoes were comfortable. I went for a run that morning, and it wasn't a release of stress. It was an expression of joy.
Mm.
And I had this wonderful ease about my decision. And I realized in that moment that whatever I do, I don't know what it's going to be. I don't know what it's going to look like, but it's going to be me. It's going to be mine. It's going to be pure. And I went to LinkedIn, and I had a small following, a really small following, probably 600 or 700 at the time. And I wrote that is essentially my post, was some version of, I woke up, the carpet was soft, the bedroom was warm, the run was great, and I'm going to be fine. I'm going to figure this out. And in that moment, Josh, my inbox blew up from people from around the world who said, I feel the same way. How did you know this was your time? How did you know you'd be okay? What are you going to do next? How are you going to make money? What'd your wife say? What'd your boss say? And I realized, wait a minute. There's a whole bunch of people who feel exactly as I was feeling before I left. They're wrestling with all the things I'd been wrestling with for the last 2 or 3 years. They just don't have anyone to talk to, like I didn't. I didn't have anybody I could talk to. So I said, okay, I'm just going to keep leaning into this. I'm going to keep showing up curious. Remember that lesson? Conviction versus curiosity. I'm like, I don't know what this is. I have no conviction over why these people are showing up. I'm just going to be curious about what's going on. And I just kept showing up for that person who was me 2 years ago. And I kept writing about it. And it just kept presenting to me what I should do next. And fast forward 2 years later, we've got Normal 40. But I want to say something. And this is really important. So who shows up to me? Who shows up here? Who are these people? And I've had 538, 540 free rambles with individuals from around the world over the course of the last 18 months. You can go onto my website and you can book time to chat with me for free. And I've talked to the most amazing people from around the world. But after 500 conversations, you pick up on some things that people have in common. And one of the things I ask every single person I've talked to when they find me, I'm like, all right, you're here for a reason. Tell me what you feel. And they all use the same language to tell me how they feel. They say, I feel like I'm on autopilot. Things just aren't challenging for me. I'm not doing bad work. It's just, I'm not doing great work anymore. It's just kind of, I'm on autopilot. But I feel frustrated. I feel controlled. I don't have control over my own calendar. Things are uncertain. I feel lost, stressed, annoyed. I feel alone, paralyzed. I'm getting stale. I feel like I've worked myself into a box. I feel anxious to do something else. I feel caged, discontent. I miss my family. And I feel a little bit of shame and guilt for wanting something other than what I have because I just spent the last 20 years getting right here. Who am I to think that I should want something else? It's unfair to my family. It's unfair to my team. And so they carry around this shame and guilt for wanting something other than what they have. So what do? Nothing. They
Yeah.
tolerate it. They stamp it down, tamp it down, and they live with it. And so then I let me just add one more layer onto this. I'm like, well, who are these people? Because it can't be everyone. What do they have in common? What are the common themes? And here's the common themes. They tend to be people who are at a high level in their professional game, leaders and executives. They tend to be people who've dedicated their whole life to something specific. They tend to be the providers for their home. They're the money makers, they're the providers, and they're the problem solvers in their home. They've got good marriages, but not great. There's room for improvement. They've lived their life by the book. They've checked all the boxes. They've done what they're supposed to do. They've been on time. They've worked hard, and they've outperformed their own expectation from only 5 years ago. They're relentlessly loyal, and they've always done what's expected of them.
Mm.
And here's the last thing I'll say about this group of people. They tend to fall into 5 different boxes, 6. Physicians and people in healthcare because they decided when they were 18 that they want to be a doctor. Career
Yeah.
military because they decided at 18 they're going to enlist. Attorneys because they decided at age 18 that they want to go to school and then law school. Accounting partners because they decided at 18 that they want to go to work for one of the big 3. Business owners because they decided young that they're going to dedicate their life to a business. And executives because they worked their whole life to get to exactly where they're at. And now they get there and they're like, holy cow, 20 years later, I'm not so sure that this is exactly what I want anymore, but they feel powerless to do anything about it.
I think that's so powerful. And I underline the word guilt, like all those feelings that lead up to that moment. That who are we to decide to go do something that we feel that we should be doing or that we want to be doing because we worked our entire lives up to this moment. Well, I always try to think of it like this is that maybe at that point you've built your entire life up to this moment for the next chapter in your life. There's always others chapters in our lives. I had to learn that the hard way. I had to kind of reinvent myself being an infantry officer, now transitioning into acquisitions and having no clue about anything, still within the scope of the Army, but understanding that, hey, there's chapters in our lives, there's seasons of our lives, and it's okay that we reinvent ourselves. And everything that I did in the past is just an opportunity to show up as present, as full as possible now, and to continue to do things that bring me joy so I can bring joy to the world, to the family of others. Because I really think that that's what leads to burnout, that anxiety, fear, the guilt that you talked about, being stressed, because then you find yourself one day older and nothing to show for it. And then over time, you look back, you're 5 years older, and all those dreams, hopes, aspirations shift. They manipulate themselves into almost fear, dread, anxiety, because you know that you're never going to want to do those things.
Yeah.
I love people like you who embrace those and then found the drive to go do it and then help other people do it. And I would love now to kind of just transition to your book, the trade, moving from the life you have to the life you want. And by the way, man, you've done so much. So I'm 2021, 2022 is when you kind of separated from the regular job side to now being an entrepreneur. You wrote a book, you have a podcast, you have a successful coaching business. So let me just ask you, how did you do so much in a short period of time?
Well, looking back, it looks like a lot. It always looks like a
Yeah.
lot through the rearview mirror. And it looks impossible looking forward. And that's it. That's a key point in my book, actually, is never underestimate how different your life can look in 1 year from now. But here's the thing. You have to actually start. Now, this is important. I quit and then I started. And
Mm.
some people do that. Some people do that on their own accord. Some people get let go. and they have no choice but to then start something else. But you don't have to do it that way. My whole the whole premise is this: you can start from wherever you are. If you have 1 week, 1 month, 1 year, 1 decade left of whatever chapter you're working on, if you've got another dance, start working on it, because you'll be amazed at how different your life can look in 1 year from now.
Yep.
So, looking back, it just like, well, look, I'm a businessman, I'm a hard worker. This is how it's supposed to be. It's just you make progress every day.
Yeah.
And, but certainly, I think from the outside looking in, it's like, well, boy, I can never achieve that much. And I just want to remind people that's baloney. You absolutely can. Anybody can. But the key difference is, I actually started, and I'm doing it, and that is so different than just thinking about how different it could be or might be. But you actually have to start. And by the way, one more thing, and this is really important: starting is easy. You just have to try something. Just do something. You don't have to quit in order to start, but you do have to start if you ever want to quit.
I think a testament to that is our first podcast.
Yeah.
I just tried it. It failed, but hey, I continue to keep going and keep moving forward, man. I love that. And I love that. I wrote it down, is that sometimes you need to quit to start. And then I thought about aspired versus practiced actions. So we have to be purposeful in our actions. What are we thinking that is aspired, and what are we actually doing that is practiced within our lives? And then I don't know if you've ever heard this or not, but it's the rule of 100%. And I don't even know if it's an actual thing, but I saw it on Instagram, and it talks about the power of just continuous action. It's a beautiful way of expressing it. So over a course of a year, if you dedicate 18 minutes a day to one thing, let's say you want to be a better soccer player. So 18 minutes a day, you play soccer. For the whole year, you'll have dedicated up to 100 hours. And at the end of that year, you'll be in the 95th percentile of soccer players within the world. And I think that's just the power of consistency and compounding, because over time, it's always rough at the beginning. Like my daughter with wrestling last year, not so awesome. This year, she's doing phenomenal because she built upon those skills. And at a certain point, you're going to have a learning curve efficiency of where now it's all clicking. And then it's just easy for you what was hard yesterday. So anyway, sorry, you got me fired up.
Yeah, no, man. But you're nailing it. You're nailing it. We sometimes overthink what it means to start. We assume it has to be public and it has to be visible, and it requires a press release. I mean, we're so tuned into a grand opening, this big splash, and like this announcement of, I used to be that, now I'm this, look how, and I just want everyone to take a breath. That's not what it is. You might get it wrong, and that's okay too, because getting it wrong enough leads to what's right. So that's why I call it exploring. So when you book a call with me, it's not a discovery call. What the hell are we discovering? That's not my language. It's a ramble. We're just going to chat. We're going to see where it goes. We're going to show up curious, and we're going to let it unfold. That is exploring. And whatever you want to start, I don't care if it's a nonprofit. I don't care if it's your own business. I don't care if it's a buyout of your company. Literally, start exploring what it could look like. That's it. One tiny step. You can do it by yourself. But find a community. My biggest thing is find a community who think like you, who are where you are on your path, because it is going to hold you accountable. Sure, accountability is good, but it's going to inspire you to move forward. And that's really what you need. You need courage. Everybody really wants to wait until they're confident, and before they start, they want to be confident that it's the right decision, confident that they're going to make money, confident that you're not going to get that. That's not how starting looks. You don't start with confidence. You start with courage, and you lean into that courage, and you explore, and then you build confidence. But you have to start with courage. You have to do the thing that feels awkward. But when you do, man, you're going to feel different in your day. That Sunday pit you have every single Sunday at 4:30, or that huge pit you have in your entire chest the day before your vacation is done, actually about 3 days before your vacation is done, all that shit, all that goes away when you have something else on the sidelines that you're betting on, that you're working through, that you're testing, you're exploring. all that goes away because that's where your energy goes. You said one more thing. You said burnout. I think burnout isn't being overworked. I think it's just working on the wrong stuff, the stuff you're
Mm,
not passionate about anymore. You could have been passionate about it at some point in your life. You could have been passionate about it for most of your life. But when your passion is somewhere else, burnout comes from not from putting too much work in, it's from the point you're working on the wrong things
yeah.
and you're not chasing what you know or you believe is next. I think that leads to just this discontent, which is another way of saying burnout.
Yep. The way I see that is purposeful action is like a tire. If a tire can spin, right, and just doing work and it looks like it's busy, but really it's not because there's no traction. But the moment that you add purposeful action to that, you have spikes within the tire, then you gain momentum. And momentum is required to accelerate in life because we all hit roadblocks. But when we gain momentum, it doesn't matter when we hit an obstacle because we can accelerate beyond that. But if we don't have traction, you're never going to move. You're always going to find yourself in the present. And the one thing I would love to talk about your book is I think there's a four-step process that you kind of walk through within this book without giving it all away, right? Because I know that people need to go buy this. Could you share a couple stories from that?
Yeah. So there is 4 steps. And look, I will give my book away. I'll
I
talk
love it.
about any portion of it.
Yeah.
It's not, um, I wrote the book. My mission, Josh, and we've talked about this, my mission literally has become to
Yep.
inspire the change in 1,000 lives. And my metric is to get 1,000 notes of thanks. My book was never written to make me rich financially. My book was to make me feel rich spiritually. And
Mm,
every day I wake up and I get these notes of thanks from people from all over the world, and it makes me feel rich. It probably will never make many mortgage payments, and that's okay. That's not
yeah.
what I designed it to do. But here's what I went through every time. So we talked about my career changes and we talked about, well, I regret it if I don't, blah, blah, all of those things. Well, I realized that as I was coming up to that, there were 4 things that I was wrestling with, and we've talked about one. The first one is knowing when you feel different. When
Mm,
today doesn't feel like it did yesterday, your excitement is something's changing inside of you and you accept that. You have to see it, appreciate it, and accept that there's a change happening inside of you. And when you do, the process goes like this. You got to start exploring something else. You got to test something. You have to take some time by yourself, selfishly by yourself. This process is a very selfish process. It is. So take some time by yourself and explore what it is that might be next, what it is that might be calling you. Don't use the wrong words here. Don't say, what is it? Who am I here to be? Those are the wrong answers yet. Those are the eventual answers. But just what might it be? Talk to a friend, hire a coach. I'm here to tell you there's a reason why people become coaches because they get hired. The great ones do great and they change lives. Hire a
yeah.
coach and start exploring. What might it be? Start letting yourself come out of your shell and start exploring. Then when you've identified a couple things, start learning, start investing your time and learning about it. Now you are learning and investing. That's step 2. And you're giving part of yourself to something. It's more than just internal. There's something external going on. Then there's testing. Now, this is the point people are going to see what you're doing. If you're going to join a board, if you're going to start a side hustle, if you're going to do some of these things where, yeah, you've done the investing and learning, now you're ready to start something like create. People are going to see it, and it's a hard step, but you just keep leaning into that, and eventually you get to this point where you make a trade. You either trade
Mm,
what you have for where you're going, or you don't. That's still a trade. You've decided to trade out of what you started back to where you were. And the point of the matter is this: I don't care what you do. I don't get a vote on what you do. My whole premise is do the math. If you get to this place in your life where you feel like your best days are upon you, they're right here, and they're not where your feet are, you're not going to be able to live out what you are here to do and who you are here to be by staying where you're at. You've got work to do, and you owe it to yourself to start something. I don't get a vote. Josh doesn't get a vote. The only person who gets a vote is the person who's feeling that way. And you have got to start that process, and you've got to start exploring. And so that's the whole premise of the book then is to be an insurance policy against future regret, to ensure that
Mm,
you don't get 5 years older or 10 years older and look back at this moment, the moment that if I'm talking to you and you're feeling it, you feel it in your gut, you see it in your head, and you're like, holy shit, this is exactly how I feel. My best days are here. My best work is still inside of me. I don't know how to let it out. What am I going to do? I'm telling you, get selfish, start exploring, and don't let yourself get 5 years older than you are right now and look back at this moment and say, God dang it, why didn't I do something? I knew how I felt. I heard that dude on the podcast talking about this, and I decided to do nothing. I didn't talk to anyone. I didn't join a community. I didn't even reach out to Josh and say, hey, thanks for putting together this great leadership podcast. It's changed my life. Don't be that guy or gal. Do something. Do something small, but do something for
mm.
you. You have to do it.
I'm gonna say it again. I love that. So I think one of the most biggest misconceptions I think within leadership is taking the time to take a tactical pause, to set back and really evaluate our surroundings. And a lot of the times, and I know you talked about like it being selfish. I think that that is an unselfish act, because when we can show up in this world as like our true authentic selves of who we are supposed to be, we can create so much more change. And I had to mentally shift my brain of thinking that, hey, investing as Josh is selfish, because I had to go, 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 like literally from 5:30 in the morning when I was going into work till sometimes not leaving work till 7:30 at night when I was in command. It was dark when I went home. That was the most miserable time. And then it was dark when I got home. And sometimes my kids were asleep the entire week and I never got a chance to see them. And then I realized quickly is that there has to be a trade-off. What you just said, I love that, is that we understand the emotions that we find ourselves in. And then we need to invest in ourselves, figure out what is the next course of action that we want to go take, or how we want to improve our current surroundings, then test those things and make it public. And I love how you talk about making it public too, because then you're adding accountability to it. Because when you share it with other people, then people can hold you accountable to what you're trying to do, because we can't do it ourselves unless you're Jocko Wellington, right? And you have extreme discipline. And then the trade-off, because then we're going to come to a moment in time of, is this more important than that? And there has to be sacrifice, because we can't have too many irons in the fire. And I love how one of my friends talked about this, is that when we have too many irons in the fire, what it does is it displaces the heat. So none of the irons ever reach the temperature enough to be molded or malleable to make into that weapon. They're hot, yeah, but it still didn't get to that desired heat to make the tool that was originally designed to do. So you can only have so many irons in a fire. And that metaphor always plays back into my mind. So I have so many people in this podcast, and this is where I want to apologize to you, is that I have not read your book yet. But I promise you, in 2024, I will read your book.
Dude, you're good. I promise you, you're good. You get, look, I named the book The Trade
Yeah.
because you realize that to get to do, there's certain points in your life when what you need to do next is no longer obvious, and it can feel irresponsible, and it's usually not free.
Mm.
And it requires then you to trade something. It requires you to give something up in order to pursue what is next. And for so long, I think you go through your career and people take bets on you. I talked about people
Yep.
always taking bets on me. And for as long as people were taking bets on me, what was next for me was always obvious. It always found me. Well, I got to be in my mid 40s. There wasn't going to be somebody next to come along to take a bet on me.
Mm.
And my option was to stay where I was or trade it for who I was capable of being.
Mhm.
It wasn't obvious. It wasn't free. It was a trade. If it was obvious and free, it would be a gift. It's not a gift.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's hard work. But man, is it worth it? When you come out there, you're going to learn when you do this, it is impossible to look back. I've never met a single person who made the trade and looked back and said, boy, I wish I wouldn't have chased my dreams. I wish I wouldn't have taken a bet on myself, even when it doesn't work. the way they wanted it to. Nobody gets to the end and says, I wish I wouldn't have tried. Everybody gets to the end and says, I wish I'd have tried when I wish I'd have started earlier, or I wish I'd have tried when I knew it was my time.
Yep. You just have to push yourself outside of that comfort zone. And I think that's a great place to transition to the final show segment that I call the killer bees. I'm sure you're familiar with these. So be brief, be brilliant, be present, be gone. The same 4 questions that I ask everyone on the Tales of Leadership podcast. If you're ready, we'll jump right in.
Yeah, let's do it, man.
So number 1, what do you believe separates a good leader from a great leader?
A great leader learns how to lead with his ears or her ears versus their mouth. And you make that transition usually later than you wish you would have. But once you do, you change lives.
Yep. Spot on, man. Number 2, what is one resource that you could recommend to our listeners to grow?
I listen to a lot of Seth Godin. I just think the guy is I'm so jealous of his ability to communicate. Yeah. He's just absolutely, well, first of all, I'm a huge believer. We preach the same things. And I didn't find Seth until a year after I was gone, even though he's been around for a long time. But man, I just think he's absolutely brilliant. I just love how he communicates, what he preaches, little P preach. And I just think that's absolutely fantastic. And then more generically, and I've said this a few times, find a tribe, find a community, and be willing to spend a few bucks. I mean, most people will spend more on dinner with their spouse one time a month than they would ever spend on themselves, trying to really feel good about where they're going. And I just really would ask you to give yourself permission to try it. Try something where you're investing a little bit of money on yourself.
Yeah, spot on, brother. Number 3, if you could go back in time and give your younger self a piece of advice, what would it be?
Well, the easy one would be to lead with your ears. I would tell myself that leadership is about showing up. And that the hardest thing that you will do in your life is to decide when you're going to not do nothing.
Yeah.
Leadership is not doing nothing. Leadership is doing something. And to really have clarity, pure clarity on who you are and what you will and will not tolerate, and live purely inside that, unapologetically. And even though I feel like I've done pretty well at that, it isn't until really late, this phase of my life in my late 40s that I know exactly who I am. And I know exactly what I will and won't tolerate. And I stand in it every day. And the sooner you can figure that out in life, the more you're going to enjoy every day you've got left.
Spot on, brother. I love that. I love when people answer that question because everyone answers it slightly different and it comes from your shared experience. So that is probably my favorite question I get an opportunity to ask great leaders like you. And the last one is, how can our listeners find you and how can they add value to your mission?
My mission is to inspire change in 1,000 lives. So you are helping my mission by allowing me to be in your podcast. And really, all I want to do is give people a moment to stop, think about where they are. And if they are not happy, if they are not living their next chapter, do something. Yeah. So that's my mission, to inspire the change in 1,000 lives. Where they can find me is pretty easy. Normal40.com gets you almost everywhere. I show up every day on LinkedIn and I leave a message that hopefully inspires, gives you something to think about, and hopefully tweaks and motivates and inspires and annoys all at the same time exactly what you're feeling, because I'm trying to twist you into doing something. That is my intent when I show up there. So it is going to be a little punchy. You can find me there every day. You can email me at lon@normal40.com. And then a couple of other things. I do have my own podcast called Normal 40, the podcast. You can join me there. And then I've got a community called The Insider that you can find from my website. When I say find a community, this is a community for some people. And you're invited to come in. We're in there at least twice a month. We've got our own boards where we're communicating. And the people in there are your biggest cheerleaders. And by the way, you'll be theirs. There's men and women of all ages. but all of them are 2 years from before making a trade to 2 years after they've made the trade. And everyone's in there supporting one another. And it's probably one of the things I'm most proud of.
I love that, brother. I love that you're being able to make the community too. And not only are you providing the information, you're also providing the support. And I always say this, but I genuinely mean it. One of my best podcasts that I've been able to film because I've learned so much from you. And you are what I call a purposeful, accountable leader or a pal. So thank you for the space of just sharing your leadership wisdom.
Yeah, man. Well, thank you. And I've said it off the top, but thank you for your service. Thank you for, look, doing a podcast is hard work and it looks easy. It looks like
Yeah.
you throw some headphones on and you hit record. And having done a fair number of my own, I know how hard it is. And to stay on message, on topic, do the editing, get it out there. And then you do so much more. I mean, you're creating content all the way around it, you're promoting it. So look, dude, from on behalf of myself and your listeners, thank you for doing it because it is having an effect.
I appreciate it, brother. Yeah. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks, man. Thanks for letting me be here. I'll see you on the next page.